This is episode 505 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing, president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. I am very pleased to be joined this week by Jodi Hendricks. She's the executive director at the New Mexico Family Action Movement. Welcome to Tipping Point, New Mexico, Jodi.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, you're new to this show, but we've met and sat down before. But why don't you tell folks about yourself and your organization, which can be found at NMFAM.org. So tell us about the New Mexico Family Action Movement.
Great. Well, we actually started here in New Mexico as Family Policy Alliance of New Mexico. If you ever heard of the Family Policy Alliance National Group, they are the policy group that branched off from Focus on the Family many, many years ago. And they help each state to be able to establish organizations within the state to focus on the state issues. And so that's how we began here in New Mexico. And just in the last year, and in 2022 in May, we were able to launch independently, kind of like a kid going off to college. Mom and dad kind of set us out on our own, and we were able to establish an independent organization here in New Mexico for New Mexico by New Mexico. And that is when we became New Mexico Family Action Movement. And so we are a nonprofit group and we focus on the family. We really care about helping the family thrive because we are firm believers that when families thrive, then our communities thrive, our states thrive, and our nation will thrive. And so we like to focus on helping families thrive by focusing on policy and how we can help direct policy, create policy, defend policy that will protect the family unit, the relationships between parents and kids, and of course, just the ability for the family to thrive overall as a family unit. And so we focus on three main things. We do focus on life. We believe that's the beginning of the family thriving. We focus on things like education, our kids, what they're being taught, the parents' rights in the classroom, in their children's education. And then, of course, we focus on religious freedom because we believe each family has the right to be able to operate within the bounds of their religious and moral views. And they should be able to teach their kids. They should be able to make decisions based on those values and not have them interfered with by the state. So we focus on those three things in policy, in helping with policy during the legislative session. But we also focus all year round on teaching and training families, churches, communities on how to be active in the civic process, how to recognize what's going on in their communities with their legislators, with candidates that are running for office in their area, laws that are being passed, and how they will affect these families. So we try to do the best we can to educate the family so that they can thrive, but then also protect the family in Santa Fe.
Wow. Well, that's a lot that you've got going on, and congratulations for that. And we're going to talk about the referendum project that you have going on right now. But if I may say, while Rio Grande Foundation has never been the in crowd with this particular governor and the legislature in Santa Fe, spending money is kind of like what politicians do. They wake up, they breathe, and they spend money. It's a challenge for us to deal with kind of all of these issues. We haven't been explicitly targeted, or our issues haven't been explicitly targeted in quite the same way as your issues have been by this governor. While, for example, on the very important tax bill that we focused on extensively during the session, you just didn't have a clear approach from the Democrats on that kind of issue. But there was no question that and has been no question, especially since the Dobbs decision came down from the Supreme Court on abortion, where the governor stood, where she was campaigning, where her activism and attention was going to be focused legislatively. And so during this last 60-day legislative session, there was a target squarely on those kinds of issues. So you were involved up in Santa Fe in the committee process and presumably organizing and testifying and doing all those kinds of things. That's kind of your normal approach, right?
Correct. Yes, we do whatever we can during the session to make sure that we give voters a voice so that we can let constituents know how their voice can be heard when it comes time for committees, when they can send messages to legislators, when they can show up and give testimony. Some of the committees this last session closed down their testimony to only allow a certain amount. And so they allowed us the opportunity to organize testimony. So we were very involved in that, of course, testifying ourselves, but also part of organizing testimonies that would help kind of build our cases on each bill. And then, of course, involved in the research and the amendment process of what kind of amendments we could see that would be helpful for some of these bills. And of course, helping our legislators, our representatives, and our senators be prepared for their arguments, their debate on the floor.
All right. Well, obviously, given the numbers that progressives had in this session and their unified approach to basically attacking New Mexico's families, you have moved on to this referendum process. And, the referendum process in New Mexico it's great because we have a referendum process. There's probably, I don't know, do you know offhand how many states do and don't have referenda? I think it's like maybe a third do and about 2/3 don't. Mm-hmm. But our referendum process is a little like the tail fins on a 57 Chevy. They're there more for show than they are for any real purpose. We haven't had a referendum on the ballot since 1964 and only a few times before that in history. And it's a very significant task to get on the ballot. So why don't you, before we get into the specific issues and the things you're trying to get on the ballot, talk about the process and just the challenges that represents for you?
Okay. So the referendum, first of all, in our Constitution, in the New Mexico Constitution, it does say that we have the power, the people reserve the power to basically say no,
right,
to annul, suspend, or disapprove of any law enacted by the legislature. And so that's why we're moving forward to begin with to practice that constitutional right that we have as New Mexicans. The process that we have a petition for referendum for 6 different bills. We have 5 circulating right now. That 6th one has yet to be to come out of the Secretary of State's office. So we have 5 bills circulating right now. And it's been wonderful because we knew that the way that we're going to be able to be successful is really to have our grassroots really working for us to help people across New Mexico understand, first of all, what is going on and why they should be involved. And so we have had an amazing response of volunteers across our state who are willing to step up and be a part of this referendum process. And so we are teaching and training each of those volunteers how to collect signatures so that they can go out in their communities to be able to kind of activate this referendum project. Of course, we need 180,000 signatures to be turned in by June 16th. That is 90 days from the close of our legislative session. And if we can get those 180,000 signatures per bill in by June 16th, then we will stop these laws from becoming law and they will be put on the ballot for referendum in November of 24.
Right. So there's 2 approaches. There's the preemptive strike, if you will, and
Yes.
then there's the, I don't know what you'd call it, the reactive strike. One is the preferred option, of course. In 180,000, that's signatures split up by county. Each and every county in the state, 33 of them, needs a proportion of voter turnout. You also are going to need some number. The number I've always, in my referendum days, had is 2 for every 1 required, that you need 2 signatures for every 1 you actually require because they tend to get thrown out. And we know Maggie Toulouse-Oliver, the Secretary of State, is not going to do any favors for collectors of these right. signatures. So there's definitely a lot of challenges. But let's talk about the mechanics of each of these bills, and feel free to share before or after how people can get involved in this, how they can sign the referendum, et cetera. So Whichever one you want to jump into first.
Okay. Well, just to begin with, if you are interested in signing one of these petitions or each one of these petitions, we have organized the state by county. As you said, we're looking for each county to make sure we are getting signatures. And so we have a county captain for each county. We have a couple of smaller counties that have kind of teamed up, and we have one county captain over that. And so there's a captain that is helping organize volunteers in their area, collecting the referendum pages once they're complete so that they can then get it to the sponsors, and the sponsors of the petitions will be the ones to submit it to the Secretary of State. So we have a lot of great information of how you can sign these petitions. And I can say this again at the end, once I've talked about the bills, because right now you might not be too sure about whether or not you want to sign. But if you do know you want to sign, you can visit two different websites. You'll get some information. Our website, www.nmfam.org. NMFAM.org has a great amount of referendum project information, which will show you things that are happening specifically in Bernalillo, and it has a link to another site that shows other county information. That other site is going to take you to bettertogethernewmexico.org, and that is where we're going to have a breakdown county by county of what is happening in your area, who your county captain is, so you can call them and get involved if you'd like to, but you're also going to see the events that we have going on in that area for you to be able to show up and sign. So we have lots of opportunities across the state for you to be able to sign these petitions if you're ready. Now, the bills themselves that we have in going through this process that we are trying for referendum, we kind of separate them into two separate categories. I'm going to talk basically about the 5 that we have circulating right now. And then the final one is one that we have not been able to start circulating yet. We'll talk about that one in just a little bit. But the 2 different categories that we have of the bills that are circulating right now, we have our election bills. I'm not sure if you were kind of watching during the session, but we had 2 very significant election bills that really make some detrimental changes to our election laws here in New Mexico. And so the first election bill that we're trying to referendum is House Bill 4. And it was all about voting registration, voter rights. But what House Bill 4 did was it created automatic voter registration through third-party MVD and other state agencies that interact with the public, which gives these agencies and additional third parties access to voter rolls and the ability to change the rolls. So that's not something that we're very happy with or secure at all. It is an automatic voter registration as well. So you're not allowing people the opportunity to say, yes, I want this. They're automatically enrolled. And so we have a couple of issues there. There is a freedom of religion issue. There are people within their religion that are not supposed to be involved in a voting process like this. And so automatic voter registration puts them in a situation where they have to go through the extra work of saying, no, I don't want to be registered. I want you to change this for me. But also it violates the Americans with Disabilities Act, because we have those with dementia, Alzheimer's, or other mentally debilitating diseases that now have to go through the extra efforts to send in the card that says, take me off the voter roll. So really there was no need for automatic voter registration. It needs to be something that people have the choice to do, not are put in the situation and forced to have to unenroll or be asked to be taken off of the voter roll. So that was a huge thing with House Bill 4. We also see that it gives felons the opportunity to vote even if they have not completed their sentence. They're able to register to vote and have their ballots sent to them wherever they are incarcerated. We have voluntary permanent absentee voter lists, of course, which increases the work on the clerks for every county. And we've got permanent drop boxes now required for each county, which violates the Constitution by legislating functions that belong to the counties. But now it's legislated. It allows people to register public buildings as a place of residence for voting purposes. So that makes it really difficult to be able to canvass for elections, and it's unverifiable information, really. And so we also see a few other things in that bill, but really this comes after our voters, our voter registration, and those permanent absentee ballots, those drop boxes, all things that really threaten the security and the integrity of our elections. And that was all just in House Bill 4.
Yeah, and just that looking at the list, that is one that certainly I'm going to try to offer my kind of centrist libertarian approach here. HB4, I think, is the one that, from our perspective, is the one that we have the most concern about of all of these. That doesn't mean that there's not concerns that folks who aren't social conservatives can have, but obviously voting is something that is integral to the entire process. And if you allow for more fraud, more questionable approaches in the voting booth and the voting turnout process, you create problems for every aspect of the political system in the state. So we are 100% with you right there on HB4. So I guess SB 180 is, and one of the things, and I have to say that it looks kind of as disorganized and chaotic as the process on all the other issues the legislature discussed. It looks like they really put the yin and yang approach into these issues by pushing multiple pieces of legislation that kind of fit together in a, you could call it Jenga or some kind of nefarious plot. But SB 180 also changed elections. Talk about that one.
Okay, so SB 180 was a monster of a bill, about 100, almost 180 pages of a bill, and it did some major things as well that really threatens the integrity and the security of our elections. One of the things that it did was public officials' home addresses will not be available in public filings anymore. So we can't verify where our candidates live and if they're actually running in a district that they live in. So that was one thing that we don't really believe helps with the transparency that we should have in our voting process, in our election process. And so we have a lot of other things that really threaten transparency. We have Section 6 changes the IPRA laws pertaining to elections, preventing the release of information to the public. So this will prevent the public from reviewing and overseeing election data. So of course that further erodes confidence in our elections. If we're not able to see the data for ourselves, then how do we know that it's being taken care of and that it's being run securely? So we can't verify or confirm the process or the results, which I believe is very detrimental because our elections need transparency. There's also a section in there that was creating an elections security program. And this one really, I was just shocked at how blatant it seemed, that this was, again, just really opening up for fraud. Because what happens is this is intended to increase control of all local elections by the state and federal government. But there are third-party vendors that have been contracted by the state to perform the cybersecurity duties that are registered as foreign corporations. Real-time synchronization can allow changes in the election without detection. So who is it that's determining these third parties? These third parties, what are they doing? They will have the ability to change the information without it ever being detected. So that is one area where we really see that lack of transparency, the loss of security and integrity in our elections. And of course, SB 180 did many other things. All special elections in the state shall be conducted absentee. Now, that means that there will be no in-person voting and, of course, an increased risk of unsecure elections when we have no in-person voting.
So hold on, let me. What elections will be done absentee only?
All special elections.
Special elections. So I remember an APS election about 4 or 5 years ago on a tax increase. Then there was the special election over replacing Deb Haaland for Congress. Um, it, and yeah, I mean, I can see the issues there for sure. That's interesting. I hadn't, these are bills that are again at the periphery of, and HB4 was definitely the big kahuna that attracting all the attention. This bill is a little less, again, SB 180, a little less well documented and well known.
Well, and I think because it was such a monster, it was so long, it was
Yeah.
hard to weed through. But we, of course, have people who have worked diligently to go through each section to figure out exactly what it's doing, and this is what we see. This is what it's going to do. One of the other things it's going to do is that it's going to authorize the release of voters' tax information to the to the Secretary of State's office. It's increasing the time that the Secretary of State takes to review petitions from the referendum process. Right now, our Constitution says that she has 10 days, 10 business days to respond to a petition for referendum, to approve or reject with notes, meaning she can reject, but basically it's, hey, fix this on your form and then you'll be good to go. That's what's supposed to happen. She has 10 business days. So SB 180 is going to expand that to 30 days for her to respond, which eats up the 90-day time period that we have to be able to submit signatures. So the thing is, she could take 30 days to respond to us and say, oh, your petition page is missing a colon.
Right.
Add the colon and then resubmit. Well, then we resubmit. She has another 30 days to respond with, oops, you're missing a period, or whatever she decides to find, because we did have that happen this time where she's rejecting things because of little things like that. And so she, all she has to do is reject it 3 times and then our 90 days is gone. So she's really, the SB 180 is really affecting the people's right, the power that we reserve to be able to disapprove, suspend, or annul any laws.
And that's just unfair to begin with. You should have on pure fairness. And I know I'm not always, or Rio Grande Foundation or conservatives or whoever are not always going to be on the side of referenda, but you shouldn't have the Secretary of State, whoever the party, able to manipulate the process that way. It should be, I would say, 90 days or some number of days from the approval by the Secretary of State, and then you move forward from there.
Right. And that's what we believe. We believe that no matter what the bill is, the people of New Mexico have this right. And so even if it was a bill that I was so excited was passed and I loved it, you know what? There are going to be people in New Mexico that don't like it. And the New Mexico Constitution, the beauty of it is that they have the right to be able to use their voice. And so what this is doing here is really trying to take the voice away from the people, to be able to stand up and say, we disapprove of this. Well, she's really interfering with that ability and that process that is outlined in our Constitution. So, of course, several other issues that we see in SB 180. The process for searching for missing ballots will no longer require a district court order to open the ballot box. They're now giving the authority to open the ballot box by the county clerk or deputy clerk in the presence of a presiding judge and 2 election judges. So this eliminates the judicial oversight and the need to justify opening the ballot box. So once again, there's a security issue in our elections. Section 10 of the bill requires service of process on the Secretary of State for all election-related litigation. So this means now the Secretary of State will be involved in all election-related legal challenges, even those that only have local impact. So where she's supposed to be on a state level, overall state impact, now she is being put in these legal litigations, legal challenges for local government. So there's a oversight, overreach there, we believe. And then, of course, the Section 11 changes the definition of the qualifications of election board members. We have the requiring of centralized training for challengers and watchers. So, the Republican Party, the Libertarian Party, the Independents, the Democrats, they all want to be able to train their own poll watchers and challengers to know what to look for. Well, they're getting rid of that opportunity, and they're saying that there has to be a centralized training for challengers and watchers. The Secretary of State, which is a partisan elected official,
Right.
will produce training material eliminating party training for their challenges and watchers. So everybody has to have the same training, but that training is produced by a partisan elected official. So that doesn't really seem right or fair when it comes to people using their voice to be able to do what they can to help the security of our elections. We also have Section 16 requiring voter convenience centers, which is hijacking local control of precincts, as stated in our Constitution, and several other issues changing the provisions related to the certification of voting machines. Our voting machines are always an issue. Now
Right.
they're even changing how those machines are to be
Now,
certified.
voter convenience centers, are those early voting centers, or what are those in practice?
From what I understand, it's basically not just early voting, it's even the day of voting, but it's outside of your precinct. It's
Okay.
wherever is convenient for voters, but it's really messing with that local control of the precincts to be able to determine where their voting locations are.
Okay.
So overall, with SB 180, we see just so many different areas where they're attacking our transparency, they're attacking our security, and they're attacking, of course, the integrity of our elections here in New Mexico. And we believe, of course, that the integrity and security of our elections is just absolutely a necessity for our state, for people to be able to trust the process, for people to be able to have a fair chance in the process. And it was really defeated with these two bills that were passed.
Yeah, and again, I think one of the critical points here is that it may not look like any one of these changes is overly ambitious. Thankfully, we're not doing ballot harvesting or some of those things that have been done in other states, or universal mail-in elections for all elections. Special elections happen, but they're fairly rare. But these are negative, certainly when taken all together and combined with HB4 as well. So,
Exactly.
all right, well, we've got a lot to still cover here.
Yes.
Now, most of the other issues are more on the kind of family specific
Yes.
front. HB7, like HB4, those are the two on these respective issues that got the most attention. I think rightly so. So let's go through HB7, Reproductive and Gender Affirming Healthcare Freedom Act. Gender affirming healthcare means can they trans your kids, and how do they have to do that, or what kind of permission do they have to get from families to do that? So let's talk HB7.
Okay. So just as you mentioned with the election bills, how they really work together, that when you look at one, it's like, oh, that's got some things we really don't like. But then when you put it with the other one, it gets much worse. And that's what we're looking at here with HB7, SB13, and SB397. They really all build on each other, and they get worse as we go. And the foundation of it all is House Bill 7, the Reproductive and Gender Affirming Healthcare Freedom Act. So overall, what HB7 did is it basically creates unrestricted access to abortion and transgender interventions across New Mexico. The thing that we are most concerned about is that there is no age limit or requirement in this bill, which means it's not just an adult that we're looking at whether or not they want these services. It's our kids. Our kindergartners in school are now being exposed to these kinds of things. And so no age requirement in the bill means that it is open to our minors, which is a really big problem. But then what it does, how it creates that unrestricted access, is that it prohibits the public body or an agent of the public body. So any entity that receives state funding. So we have our public schools, we have our fire department, our police department, we have CYFD, we have just a multitude of organizations across the state, state organizations that cannot restrict, deny, or interfere with a person's ability to receive these services. So the public body or an agent of the public body, anyone working for any of these types of entities. So I like to give the example of our public schools and our school teachers because we're really looking at our kids here. These bills, we really want to focus on what they're doing to our children. And so I really like to focus kind of on our schools and our school teachers. We have our schools and school teachers now who are prohibited from restricting, denying, or interfering with a student's access to these services. Now, the problem with that is that the language is so incredibly broad. What is it to interfere? That could be a multitude of things. Let's say that we have a student who goes to a teacher and says, I want to change my name. I want to change my pronouns. I want to use a different facility in the bathroom, in the locker room. And I want access to transgender support groups in school. Well, that student or that teacher is required under Title IX to provide these things for this student. It's called a gender support plan. Our teachers are being trained on how to create these gender support plans. And in their training, we have video evidence of this. In their training, our teachers are being told that they cannot call the parents. And so we have a video actually where a teacher says, wait a minute, so I'm supposed to create this plan, which is a social transitioning plan. By the way, social transitioning is considered medical treatment. So we have our teachers now having to create these gender support plans. And she said, so I'm not supposed to call the parent. And the trainer said, oh, no, it's not that you're not supposed to. You cannot call the parent unless the student gives you express permission. And so we have teachers who are specifically being told to leave the parents out. Well, House Bill 7 now puts the teachers in a situation where a student comes to them, they want one of these gender support plans, and they say, my parents wouldn't understand. And so the teacher, let's say the teacher says, yeah, but, I really feel like your parents need to be involved in this. This is a really big decision. This is, considered medical care. And so we want to include the parent. That teacher calls the parent. And now that student can say, this teacher interfered with me receiving the services that I wanted. And therefore, because that teacher interfered, that school can now be fined $5,000 and legal action can be taken. So we have our teachers in a very sticky situation where they just have to affirm. They cannot ask questions.
And they could even be
call
encouraging.
Exactly.
There's no prohibition. There's no accountability for that if they have an ideological preference or even, heaven forbid, worse than that. It could be something that they're actively encouraging at the school. Well, exactly. There's also abortion in that. We're going to have to limit the amount of time to run through these other bills or this that aspect of this particular bill, because abortion is basically another thing that they can do without telling parents at the school, that kind of thing. Yes. So briefly explain. Yeah. Okay. All right. So we've got SB 13, SB 397, school-based health centers, which again, like the yin and the yang, like the glove in the hand, that is designed to carry out the transitions, the abortions, the this, that, and the other thing. Then you have 207. Now that's the sixth amigo, so to speak. That's the one that hasn't been approved yet. The Secretary of State has not allowed that one yet to be collecting signatures. So if you are asked to sign, and sadly 207, every day that goes by is a missed opportunity to collect signatures. But the five that have been approved are HB 7, we just talked about, SB 13, SB 397, HB 4 on the voting, SB 180 also on the voting, So talk about briefly SB 113 and 397
Okay.
and what those specifically do, and then we'll have to wrap it up.
Okay. So those ones can actually be summed up pretty quickly. When you
Okay.
understand the base of HB7 and what it does, how it kind of ties the hands of people, and it starts to cut the parent out because of the age restrictions and the lack of parental notification and consent requirements. Then we have SB 13, which protects anyone who's providing or receiving the services. But where our parental rights issue comes in here is that it's protecting those who are seeking the services on behalf of someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's go back to that teacher situation. We have a teacher who says, yes, I think this is the great path for you. Let's not call your parents. And I can drive you to a location to start receiving these services. And I'm protected. So someone who even decides that, despite what the parents believe, they really, they are strong believers in this form of care. And so they're now taking it upon themselves to take this minor to these appointments with a medical provider, a mental health counselor, whatever it might be that this student is seeking. That person, that adult, is now protected by SB 13. And again, there's nowhere in the bill that requires parental notification. Because of HB 7, SB 13, that parental notification is a non-issue. If it's not required, it's not needed, and you can keep moving forward. And so that was a major issue as far as our parental rights. We do have a freedom of speech issue in SB 13 as well. If you'll notice at the end of the bill, there's a section that talks about electronic communication. And of course, the whole section is focused on they want to limit speech electronically that could be used to harass or make someone feel unsafe, which of course we don't want to encourage that kind of language either. But what really was just sickening with the violation of freedom of speech was that they're fining people up to $10,000, individuals. So not an entity, not a public body, an individual. Who sends out an electronic communication that is meant to deter someone from these services. That has now broken this law, and that individual can be fined $10,000. So if you want to send out an electronic communication and say, hey, I just feel like I really want to let you know the science behind the gender affirming model, and it's dangerous, and the science shows that our kids are more susceptible to suicide, and these are the issues that they're going to face. And these are the kind of places that are giving this treatment, and we need to be careful. Well, that person could now be fined $10,000. So it was a major attack on pro-life speech, but also on, the speech of someone wanting to just inform. But if it's meant to deter, you've now broken that and you could be fined $10,000. So our parental rights issue continues through SB 13. We also have that freedom of speech issue. But then we look at SB 397, and what it does is it takes the services that are now unrestricted in HB 7, the protections of the providers, those receiving and those seeking the services for another person from SB 13, and it now brings all of that onto our school campus or within walking distance. Now, we're not going to see an abortion clinic set up on a school campus. However, in tandem with these other bills, we now see that those school-based health centers can refer for abortions. A nurse from that school-based health center could drive a student right over to an abortion clinic, help her to receive the abortion, and send her on her way. She's well within her rights based on these bills. We have school-based health centers already providing things like birth control and spermicides and the Plan B pill, all things that need to be monitored under a doctor's care. Women can have adverse reactions to birth control. Well, if a young girl is getting that from a school-based health clinic and has no accountability with a provider to follow up on how that's affecting her, it could be harmful. She could be one of those cases that it's detrimental. And so we don't have that accountability within these school-based health clinics. But also now we look at the services that are unrestricted in House Bill 7. And our logical question is, how long will it be before our school-based health clinics are providing puberty blockers? Those are medications that are cause lifelong problems for our youth, and we have them being offered potentially or maybe referred to for these types of medications, all from a school-based health clinic. And all the while, the parents do not have to be informed.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there, but boy, a lot of stuff in these particular bills and on the at stake in this referendum process. So why don't you give out how people can participate and or sign these referendum?
So if you would like to sign, again, if you visit our website, nmfam.org, you'll find referendum project information of locations of where you'll have signing opportunities, different things going on in your different areas so that you can show up and sign those petitions. If you would like to volunteer and help us collect signatures, you can also find information through our website, nmfam.org. You can also visit bettertogethernewmexico.org and click on the Referendum Project tab. There you'll find petition resources to be able to print out your own packet. You'll find the rules that you have to follow to be able to collect signatures. And you'll also find several other training videos that will help walk you through those rules, the opportunities as well as to how to get in touch with your county captain to be able to get involved as a volunteer.
All right. Well, best of luck. We are in support of this effort, and I hope you can get these on the ballot. And if not on the preventative side, then on the flip side, when after the law takes effect, you would then be able to have a vote on that. So thanks for listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube channel. Subscribe to this show at Apple, Stitcher, or tell Google Home to play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.